Welcome to the Cloudless Mind podcast about neuroscience, non-duality, and change management. Introducing your host, Paul Smit.
Welcome to the third episode with the neuroscientist Ayca. We talked about creativity, we talked about free will.
Yeah.
Let's go more down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
We feel as if we are a separate entity. It's my true feeling that I am Paul.
Mm-hmm.
But now let's look at neuroscience. Am I Paul?
Yeah. Well, that's another myth or misconception about who we are.
Mm-hmm.
We all think when we talk about what we do in the world, we start our sentences with I.
Yeah.
And
which is fine, of course.
Which is okay because you don't want to say this body does this or this hand or Ayca. So you feel or you have the feeling that you're in this body. So you do stuff in this world. So you talk about I. And we talked about free will and making our own choices and behaviors. So there we already found out that it's not really us who are making the decisions for our behaviors. So already there's kind of a difference between who does what we do and whom we think we are. If you look at the brain, it's a huge machine of activating neurons. Mm-hmm. So when we do something from movement to thinking, whatever it is, there is activation, and it's 24/7 ongoing, so until we die.
Yeah.
On the basis of research, we can find out, for example, if I move my hand, we know a little bit where it starts in the brain and which areas are active. But there is no point or a region in the brain that starts the activation of everything that we do. So I'm talking about a boss here. There is no manager to find in the brain. So no neuroscientist has found this.
So the brain is actually a factory with no manager that actually does well.
Exactly.
We don't need managers.
Okay, the conclusion of this podcast is we don't need
fire
managers.
your leaders.
Just make yourselves fire. Yeah, so what happens, it's a network of activations that learns from doing.
Yeah.
So it's already pre-programmed when you there's some kind of pre-programming when you are born, but there is also an ongoing learning while you live and do things. And that's how you associate behaviors with other things and you shape your behavior in the world.
So we have the feeling that this is me, as if there is a puppet with a control room in my brain that is doing things.
Exactly.
But if you examine this, there's of course not a puppet in your head, like you said. There's no manager, there's no one controlling it.
No.
So therefore the question, who am I, gets a really different perspective. Yeah. Because what would be the answer? I mean...
Exactly. So what we think we are is somebody who actually hears things in her brain and then comes to the conclusion of who she or he is. And where this comes from is a philosophical question.
Yeah.
So this is, going back to the brain being, activation. So there is this managerless factory that's doing well. And there's somebody there's this voice telling us that we are doing it. And in the end, we have the conclusion that we are the person running the factory.
Which is, in a way, a bit weird, because I could say now, like, I am choosing which words to speak.
Yes.
Well, actually,
you could say that.
Well, actually, words come out, and afterwards, my brain creates the illusion that this was me talking.
Yes.
But I'm not saying I am running the blood through my veins. Or I am growing my hair, or I am replacing cells, or I'm healing my wounds, or...
If you sleep, for example, everything continues.
Yeah.
You go to sleep and your body keeps on living and it does everything perfectly the way it's supposed to. And you wake up with no problems normally and it knows what to do.
So in our deepest sleep, the sensation of being an I, the self-awareness, is completely
non-existent.
Non-existent.
Exactly. So the funny thing is we think it's logical that we are not the ones working the cells at the cellular level.
Yeah.
It does it by itself, and it does it by itself at the organ level, and it does it by itself at the parts of the body level. But there's some kind of a border somewhere, and if we go beyond it, then we say, well, I'm doing it. But actually, there is no difference in moving your body and even thinking who's doing it. But all of a sudden, that illusion of self becomes so strong that we get attached to it when we get older. So
and that's interesting. That at some point, thoughts come out of nowhere; they just pop up. But then there's the identification with, oh, I created this thought, and it's my thought, and I'm going to take this thought very seriously.
Yes. Well, it's also very functional socially, right? When you're a baby, you're not really aware of yourself as a different person, a different self. And you don't have thoughts about your thoughts and needs. So things happen. You need to pee, you need to eat, you have pain, it's all the bodily reactions. So it happens by itself. Not different than a 40-year-old person. It just happens by itself, except the baby doesn't have thoughts about it. So what happens is when it starts moving and interacting and starts seeing the consequences of his own behavior, starts attaching meaning to this. So in a social environment, we start valuing the consequences of our actions. Then we start having goals. The goal is that I am loved. The goal is people like me. The goal is I want to be this, I want to do that. So, and then you introduce the concept of I need to do something to reach somewhere. And there, the first time I say now, So I need to do this. And then you get the false control of, your the actions of your life or the life itself. So at an age of 1.5 years old, around that age, children become aware, or I shouldn't say become aware, because that insinuates reality, but they start developing a sense of self separate from the world around them.
Yeah, so if you put a child, let's say 1 year old, in front of a mirror, the child is aware of a reflection, but there's no self-awareness, there's no feeling of that reflection is me.
Exactly.
Same with dogs and cats. You can Google on YouTube.
They'll be scared of themselves.
Oh, Google on YouTube. It sounds weird. Google is about to become the biggest search engine instead of Google. So that's interesting. But if you go on YouTube and just search for dogs and cats looking in the mirror, it's hilarious.
Exactly. Because they don't really think that it's somebody else. So they get scared of themselves. And So that distinction of I am separate from others, but also I'm separate from anything around me, starts developing when we observe ourselves in an environment of people. That's social behavior.
Yeah. And this sense of I, although it's useful, it's also the cause of a lot of clouds, a lot of stress, a lot of frustration. I think that's why people try to get rid of this sensation by bungee jumping, by doing drugs, by eating. Because at the moment you are focused on something else, or at the moment you're in flow, for instance, with sports, reading a book, then the self-awareness is switched off. So, for instance, I think watching a movie is a good analogy. When you watch a movie, you are only aware of the movie, but at some point you are not self-aware anymore. There's not the sense like I am in a cinema watching the movie. No, there's only the movie taking place. And so people feel liberated for 2 hours.
So you feel like you're being carried to all these places and you go with the story of the film, right? But you never think, well, I'm sitting here, I'm looking at this movie and what's happening right now I don't like, so I want to change it, so I want to will it differently. Nobody says that because it's ridiculous, right? Yeah. But our life is like that, and we experience this urge and actually the guilt feeling of not having things under control constantly.
Yeah.
Because we have this huge sense of self-accountability for everything that we've done. Yeah. And this damages, of course, this is not good for your, I should say, mental happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we talk with the Cloudless Mind, from the sense of I, the first fears pop up, like I need to be good enough.
Right.
That's most probably the biggest fear of human beings.
Yes.
And so many people are actually insecure.
Right. The first and the utmost need of a person is, this also comes from the moment that you were born. You need the care of your mother initially, right? Or somebody else who will take care of you, because that's your way of surviving.
Yes.
So at that moment, you're not aware of this. The only thing you are aware of is your need. When we start thinking about these things, there is a risk or a danger of not having this care and love from the person who needs to take care of you. So you start thinking, I need to be worthy of the love. And this is a survival instinct. So from the moment that you're 2, you start doing the things to get laughs from other people, to please your mom, and of course sometimes not. But this becomes the biggest urge of every human being, to be worthy. I'm going to use the word love. Yeah. That is true. Mm-hmm. Of course, in work environment, we see it differently, but that's also a survival. You want people to see you as who you are and accept you and just facilitate your existence in the world. Yeah. So this is a very strong need that we have.
Yeah. Well, it's all based upon an illusion.
Yes.
That is so funny. Yes. And even they interviewed a lot of CEOs. They also say, my biggest fear is that I am not good enough when I do a speech, that people won't like me, that people won't approve me.
Yes.
But
it's not even you.
No, because there is not even a you.
There is not a you.
But the thing is that the apparatus starts to please or starts to act dominantly and becomes less authentic in a way.
Yes.
And that's what you see in companies, people playing all kinds of political games. No one is genuine. There's no transparency. People are being dishonest. And that's such a struggle.
So it's basically, you look at the person that you see and you say, oh, that's me. So I need to work and I need to do this and I need to go there. Whereas what you could do with this knowledge, what we just talked about, you can observe the person as he or she is. So, oh, there's Paul. Oh, look at Paul. He's doing this. Yeah. Oh, look at Paul. He's doing that right now. So that takes the load off of you being in control of everything. Yeah. And what it does is, paradoxically, because you're relaxed about what you're doing, it gives space to be who you are, or to fulfill that role in the world much more relaxedly, because then you are in the moment, as we call it.
And people can feel that. I mean, and even increases trust and connection because people feel you're genuine.
Exactly.
I mean, if we go back to the analogy of the cinema, imagine you are an actor in the movie. Then you would just laugh at yourself. Like, oh, he's now screwing up. He's now having success. You're the observer of what's happening instead of identified with it.
Exactly. Yes.
And is this your main focus point as a self-realization coach?
Yes, it is one of the biggest, because, seeing, it's a huge statement when you just start out with, by the way, you don't exist. So that doesn't really...
Lesson 1.
Yeah, that's not really lesson 1. Exactly. Well, it is the only realization and the insight that you need to shift, to put everything else into perspective. Yeah. But the mind is, and some call it the ego, is so clever that until you have tried everything and work, it won't be persuaded and convinced that work will not take you anywhere.
Yes. Yeah.
So some people want to work, and then in the end they go, oh my God, shit, but I only needed to see this.
Yeah.
So for everybody, it's a different path, depending on what kind of intellectual level, how, strong their ego is and how open they are. But it starts with looking at yourself from a distance.
Yeah.
And seeing that you are not the one doing it. And then you can have compassion with yourself. And I'm using the word yourself, but I mean that person, actually.
Yeah.
And then you think, okay, well, that's Ayca. Ayca is doing this in the world. And you start actually thinking from a very objective point of view. And that there's love in there. There's acceptance. And it's objective. So you can be very productive about giving ideas to that person. So it's a very, much lighter way of living if you can see yourself from a distance. And of course, this is the question. The question comes, okay, and I'm talking about you seeing yourself. So who's the real you?
Yeah.
And the I. So I am looking at myself. I am looking at Ayca. And which I am I talking about right now is then the biggest philosophical question.
It's even what people can literally experience right now. Because if you have a thought comes and it goes.
Yes.
But who is looking at the thought?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the saying goes, I'm looking at you, but who's looking at it? There's not a Paul looking, but we could call it, in India, they would say it's consciousness, for instance.
Yes.
Even philosophically, you could say that's not even the final reality, but
no.
That's another topic. But at some point, if you, like they call in the Matrix, take that red pill,
right,
it's a total paradigm shift.
Yes, because you normally you would put your focus on your role in this world as the person that you are. And when you talk about yourself, you talk about that person. Me, Ayca, being a consultant trainer, a neuroscientist, and being a mom, and all those roles. But when you start observing yourself, it's as if you detach yourself from the role and you're observing. Now, this is one level, so you're just at a distance observing. So this you could call like an eye looking at something. But this is also an entity which is in the doing of something. So it's something that is looking at something else.
Yeah.
And if you are very silent, you also notice that all of these things that take place somewhere. And that somewhere is also always present.
Yeah.
And there's, for lack of a better word, something is always conscious of the fact that an I is looking at the role of the human being.
Yeah.
So actually, we just, defined the role, the person, human being I, and then there's the looking I, but then there's also something else where this all comes and goes, which has no senses, which has no judgment, which has no words or form, but I can even call it the space where this happens, and this space is present at every minute because I am talking about it right now, and this is happening. We're sitting with microphones in our hands.
Yeah.
And when I, draw myself back, I can look at myself as, Ayca is moving her hands. But at the moment, there is something here that is holding these things.
Yes.
So this is the biggest question of, okay, if that is always there from the moment you are born until you are dead, and that's the only thing that doesn't change as a phenomenon, maybe we can start thinking that maybe that's the you that we're talking about.
Not a separate you from
Not a
everything
separate
else,
you.
but maybe the oneness which everything is. We don't know, but
exactly.
yeah. Well, this was a good trip down the rabbit hole.
Yes.
You can buy red pills on our website.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Ayca.
It was my
I loved
pleasure.
it. And see you next time.
Bye.